Welcome in, everybody, to the latest edition of the Flagship Podcast. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined as always by my esteemed colleague and proud Tampa Catholic graduate, the one and only Eric Henry of Horns247.com. Hope everyone's summer is going well. Full disclosure, we're recording on June 11th. The morning of June 11th. And, this is that time of year where we're looking ahead to football. We're checking in on recruiting for all the other sports. But Eric, last weekend, we had a national championship won by the Texas softball team, and it was amazing stuff. This could be a 30 for 30. Just the championship series between Texas and Texas Tech could be a 30 for 30, Eric. Tegan Cavan versus Nigeri Kennedy. Reese Atwood hitting a 2 RBI single when it was supposed to be ball 4 of an intentional walk. The 3-run homer by Leanne Good in Game 3, the grand slam home run by Mia Scott, one of the best players ever to grace McCombs Field in the burnt orange, and Mike White, who coached the daughter of Texas Tech coach Jerry Glasgow. Jerry Ann Glasgow was a player for Mike White at Oregon. She passed away at the age of 24 in 2019. Mike White and Jerry Glasgow bonded by Jerry Ann. And Jerry Glasgow is a great story in his own right, former hunting guide in Mexico. And the drug cartels kind of ran him out of that job. And he just ended up coaching his daughter's softball. And here he is, the head coach of the Texas Tech softball team. But Eric, want to get your thoughts on Mike White breaking through in his 8th trip to the Women's College World Series, 5 with Oregon, 3 with Texas. Texas had been to the championship series 2 of the last 3 years. This trip making it 3 of the last 4 years. And they get it done against Texas Tech and Nigeri Kennedy, the now $2 million pitcher for the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Your thoughts?
Chip Brown, what is going on? Good morning to all of our viewers, and of course, those of you who will listen to this, whatever time of the day you will listen to it. Apologies for leaving you for a week. I was off doing some things, jet setting, so didn't have a chance to record.
Yeah, a little summer vacation, that's allowed.
It's allowed. Little break, right? Recharge the batteries. So. But we couldn't have picked a better time to jump back in. As Chip said, another national championship coming to the 40 acres. Yeah, my thoughts. I mean, you did a great job covering everything there, running down the list. And, this is in my 4 downs column, which is out this morning. I mean, that team just really embodies Texas fight, in my mind. I mean, you can't, as I'm getting a phone call, I can fill in here. A phone call from Texas fan Mark Henry is hitting me up. I'll have to hit Mark back in a few. Of course, Austinite there. No, the team just really embodies Texas fight, Chip. You talk about Mia Scott playing on a torn ACL. I mean, that in itself, right, you want to talk about gutting it out, Chip. To me, and we'll talk about this because we're going to talk a little bit about the House settlement and other things. Chip, that team, if you really want what college sports is about, that's it, right? I mean, majority of these girls, yes, there is now a burgeoning professional softball league, but for the majority of these young women, this is going to be it, right? I mean, sure, they'll have a couple opportunities to play softball here or there, but this is going to be the pinnacle, Chip. This is going to be the pinnacle of their playing careers. And to me, it's just awesome. As you talked about, Tegan Cavan going 5-0 in her career against Nigeri Kennedy. I mean, that is impressive. So much just fight, the way they came back. And remember, this is a team that finished 7-7 to end the year, right? Including the Big 12, tries again, including the SEC tournament. They finished 7-7. They were swept by OU, right? I mean, I feel like, to me, Chip, you did a great job covering things. I'll just make this point. This was the OU Invitational, right? 4-time defending national champion OU. This was the OU Invitational heading into the Women's College World Series. Texas manages to beat them. The Sooners go down. I mean, so much. You talk about it. It could be a 30 for 30, right? And you know, I know there's not a formal Longhorn network. I guess I should say there's not an over-the-air Longhorn network, but there's still an app. And I'm sure, you know, the folks over there at Longhorn Network will do a great job producing some sort of continuous documentaries about this. And you know, years from now, we'll write about it. But I, as I mentioned in my 4 Downs column, this is a team that I think should be talked about in Texas lore for years to come, Chip.
Yeah. Yeah. And make sure you check out Eric's 4 Downs column. And hopefully you've been paying attention to what's going on over at Horns247.com, because the recruiting coverage has been outstanding from Hank South and Jordan Scruggs and Will Turboff, all kinds of big-time official visits and commitments happening. And the State of Recruiting podcast. Keep an eye out for that on the Horns 24/7 podcast platform. Eric, great point on OU. Texas was 0-16 against OU in the state of Oklahoma under Mike White. 0-16 under Mike White. 0-3 and 21 and 0-3 and 22 and 0-4 and 23 and 0-3 and 24. I mean, we don't talk about that 4-2 win over the Sooners, which gave the Sooners their first loss in the Women's College World Series. Yes, Texas Tech eliminated OU, but Texas sent them into the losers bracket. Texas beat Florida, OU, and Tennessee to get into the championship series. Texas did just that and shut out Florida and Tennessee. But, you know, Tegan Cavan, sophomore. I mean, and you know what, Eric, I compare her demeanor to Scotty Scheffler. She looks like she's going to do laundry. She looks like she's making a grocery list when she's competing. She doesn't give you anything. That poker face assassin. And she just drills down. Everyone knows now she was a high school classmate of Caitlin Clark at Dowling Catholic there in West Des Moines, Iowa. But Tegan Cavan, she's just that silent assassin, and she's a legend, absolute legend. And there's more to come from this Texas softball team, because Hannah Wells, who's the big time recruit coming in for Texas, who is a pitcher and hitter. Mike White loves those two-way players because he was a pitcher and hitter in his fast pitch softball career. But Hannah Wells is coming. This is a loaded recruiting class coming, and they get a ton of these players back, Eric. 7 position players are back. They'll lose Jolie Mitchell. They'll lose Mia Scott, and that's a crusher. They'll lose Mac Morgan, who came up with a huge win against Tennessee in the Women's College World Series. But they'll lose Katie Simis and some of the, Vanessa Quiroga, who some of their designated players. But this is a loaded team coming back in 2026, Eric. So lots of excitement around this program. By the way, Hannah Wells, Texas Gatorade Player of the Year. Kat Osterman, also the Texas Gatorade Player of the Year. So that tells you what kind of company Hannah Wells is keeping. I just think you got to give credit. I go back to this move by Mike White. They were down to how many feet, 60 feet?
Yeah.
They were 60 feet away from losing to Clemson. Clemson had bases loaded, no outs, bottom of the 8th, extra inning, sudden death, and Clemson was the home team in that game. If they get a run across, they win. Texas' season is over. Tegan Cavan gets out of that inning with 2 strikeouts, and Texas wins that game. And it was the turning point. They never lost again until the second game of the Women's College World Series final against Nigeria Kennedy. And Mike White moved Katie Stewart from shortstop to left field, Katie Bennett from left field to second base, and Leanne Good from second base to shortstop. And it solidified everything. Tegan Cavan said, I was not confident in my defense behind me because I would turn around and look at their faces, and I did not see confidence. But after that move, Eric, she did see confidence. And you saw Tegan Cavan's confidence soar. She threw 5+ innings of scoreless relief in the Game 3 Super Regional win over Clemson, and never looked back. Never gave up a earned run in 31.2 innings at the Women's College World Series. That's a record, Eric. It will probably be hard to be broken.
No doubt. Chip, you mentioned that, and that's a really, good call on your part as far as that Clemson series. I want to go to one in the Women's College World Series against Texas Tech, Game 2. I thought it was interesting, and I think depending on who you ask, some people were a little curious about the decision to go with Mac Morgan, Game 2, right? Of course, you go up, right? And you have that opportunity there.
You're up 1-0. You can go for the kill.
Right. And go with Mac Morgan, and then pull Mac Morgan and go to Cambria Salmon, right? Some people were a little curious of that decision. Listen, I'm not going to sit here and try to sound smarter than I am, but to me, I felt like that was the right move in this specific sense, Chip. And we can talk about this as long or as little as you want.
This is part of the 30 for 30.
Nigeria Kennedy would end up pitching 60 of 70 innings in the postseason for Texas Tech. The only game in the postseason that she did not pitch was their opening round or opening contest against, I believe it was Brown, I believe it was. Everything else, she pitched every single game. If you know that you got a pitcher who's pitched 60 of 70 innings, that's 85 and change percent of the innings, you got to take the odds she's going to wear down at some point, right? And eventually she did, as we saw in Game 3. So I understand saying, hey, I want to leave my ace, my stud, Tegan Cavan, for Game 3, and know that if we got to go head to head, and as I mentioned, entering that game, that would be game, she's already 4-0 against Nigeria Kennedy, and she'd be fresher, that would be the right move. And again, I'm not trying to sound smarter than I am, but I understood it. For the people who maybe, was a little bit of angst of saying, hey, to your point that you made, Chip, you got to go for the kill. I can understand that POV, but you can't, for lack of a better phrase, shoot your quad in the first, 20 minutes of a contest, right? Like you got to go for the long haul for the whole hour and 60 minutes. So I thought that was, I don't want to say he outmanaged or outcoached Texas Tech, because, obviously you're playing with a different deck of hands in terms of what was available to both teams. But I think in terms of being part of the 30 for 30, I thought that was brilliant coaching on my part, Chip. On his part, Chip.
Yeah, on both your parts. I agree with you. I mean, Mike White is a guy who will play the long game, and he did it. He played the long game. I think some people were surprised by Mac Morgan pitching starting that game against Tennessee. That was a gutsy call, but Mike White knew he had, a fiery competitor in Mac Morgan. He trusted her. She struggled a little bit toward the end of the season, but these were players who had been there. They got to the final. Some of them were, Mac Morgan was there in 22 when they got shelled as the only unseeded team ever to make it to the Women's College World Series final. And then got shelled 16-1 and 14-5 by OU. And then they came back last year. It was a little closer. They still got swept in the final by OU. But this was a team full of resolve. And their motto was fuel the fire. And it was born out of the loss to OU in the championship series the year before. And so Mike White trusted his veterans and his freshman, Cam Salmon. And they lost game 2. But Eric, you knew in the first inning of game 3 that the strategy was right, because they got to Kennedy. Leanne Good, 3-run homer. They're up 5-0 in the first inning, and Nigeri Kennedy is done. And they got some nice relief performances here and there, but Mia Scott hits a grand slam home run, which I thought was so fitting for her career, because she was so Gold Glove at third base, playing with a torn ACL. And Eric, I'm not sure that torn ACL happened this year. It might have happened last year, because if you look at her stolen bases, they fell off a cliff from her freshman and sophomore year to her junior and senior year. But nonetheless, Mia Scott, unbelievable hands at the plate, can hit for power, but would just hit for average and placing the ball in left center. And I just thought there was a lot of poetic justice. Plus, Leanne Good, who had struggled defensively. I mean, Texas struggled defensively in the Women's College World Series final. 3 errors in game 2, 4 errors in game 2, 3 errors in game 3. But Leanne Good hits the 3-run home run. What a moment. So really good stuff. And I know we don't talk a whole lot of softball on the Flagship Podcast, but I'm not kidding. That could have been a 30 for 30 with as high profile as Nigeri Kennedy is, because she's back for another year. And she is in many cases, the face of the $1 million NIL club, even though we know there are others across all sports. But her impact was enormous. I mean, Texas Tech was a laughingstock in softball. And she gets there, and Jerry Glasgow gets there, and he brings 7 players over from his team at Louisiana. And how weird was it that Sam Landry, his pitcher at Louisiana, he had to go up against, because she's the ace for OU. I mean, there was a lot going on in this Women's College World Series. But kudos to Texas. They were the 6th overall seed. As Eric said, they limped in. The defense was a problem. That change in the middle of the Super Regional, moving Katie Stewart back to left, you could see her confidence come back in. That made her more confident at the plate. She ends up hitting some big home runs in the Women's College World Series. She went 7 for 13 for crying out loud. She batted .538. Unbelievable performance from Katie Stewart. She's back next year. Obviously, Reese Atwood, her first hit is the ball for. She sees the ball over the plate. That was the moment. I mean, Hank South, our colleague at Horns247, started a thread. Where does that sports moment rank in Texas athletics history? I mean, 4th and 5. Vince Young is always going to be number 1, or depending on how far you want to go back, Street to Peschel for the against Arkansas to win the 69 national championship. But that's in the conversation, Eric. I mean, what a heads up move by Reese Atwood, because trying to intentionally walk someone as throwing underhanded.
Yeah.
And if you don't coach your catcher to put her hand out and say, I can't leave the box till you throw it, but if you throw it over here, I can jump out of the box and catch it. Instead, she's throwing it over the plate, and it, one fell right in the zone, and Reese Atwood gets the first hit. She was 0 for 14, and it turns out to be a 2 RBI single that wins game 1.
Yeah, Chip. Excellent point there. And as you mentioned, we don't get to just talk a ton of softball. So I want to make a couple additional notes. One, and I'm curious your thoughts, and I guess we should note this, that it ended up coming out in the aftermath of the game. That ended up being the most watched women's or most watched softball game in history. 2.4 million viewers, right? I think it goes to show the power of the Texas brand. I think it goes to show the emergence of women's sports. I think it goes to show Texas versus Texas Tech, right? You got that angle. And that leaves me wondering if there's a possibility, Chip, somehow, some way, that we can see this matchup again next year. Come on the regular season. Obviously, both clubs not in the same league, so you're not going to get it in conference play. Could you get a holiday tournament that features both clubs? I think, Chip, if you're a fan, if you're a Horns fan, a Red Raider fan, a sports fan, you'd want to see this. Tegan Kavan versus Nigeri Candidate, right? Like, that's built in must-see TV. So go ahead, Chip.
I think we will get it because we did it in the Bevo Classic in February when Tegan Kavan had 18 strikeouts and Kennedy had 11 at McCombs Field in 40-degree weather. I think Mike White, Jerry Glasgow, I think they will give us that next year. And I agree with you. I mean, people want to see that matchup now. And it's good television. So plan accordingly. Texas and Texas Tech. Put that game where everybody can see it.
Yeah. And forgive me for those who are going to end up listening to this. I'm battling a little bit of a flu. So I'll remember that I'm not just doing this for a video audience. I will try and mute myself for those coughs. Only other point I was going to make, Chip, was Nigeri Candidate. I think, and I wanted to tweet this when it became clear that Texas was going to win the game, right? They went up 6-0 in the third inning. The spotlight, rightfully so, should be on Texas. Because obviously, Candidate is kind of, as you noted, a face, right, of college softball because of the NIL package. And she gets talked about a lot. And the attention deserved to shift to all of the storylines on Texas. But something that I admire is, Chip, and I think you can appreciate this, and maybe I'm just speaking from a media sense. When it comes to NIL, if you dared ask a football player or a men's basketball player about their NIL compensation, you'd act as if you asked them for, their social security number, right? Like, Nigeri Candidate never ran from the fact that she was earning a 7-figure NIL package. And I just thought that was really commendable, considering the fact that, think about it, right? In a sport that is, not one of the traditional high revenue earning sports, to be brought in from Palo Alto, California to Lubbock with that type of, expectations to take the ball every time she did, I just thought that was really commendable. So I just, I'll make that point because we talk about Nigeri Candidate and Tegan Kavan and that matchup. So hopefully, both of them can get the recognition that they deserve. Kennedy obviously gets a ton of it, but also Tegan going into next year. But yeah, I just found that really commendable, Chip, because, to embrace that spotlight, embrace that pressure, and not run from it and say, I was brought here with a high price tag to win. I just thought that was really commendable, Chip.
Yeah. I mean, she is an unbelievable competitor and I mean, deserves so much credit for turning that program around. Look, Cody Campbell, the mega booster at Tech, who, initiated that NIL deal with Nigeri Kennedy. Good move. I mean, and it shows, Eric. We're going to get to Texas football. We're going to get to Texas baseball and women's basketball and all the things going on. Take it or leave it. But let's transition into the House settlement because we're in a new world. You don't feel it yet, but we're all waiting to see how this plays out. Eric wrote about this in his 4 Downs column over at Horns247 that came out this morning. So make sure you check that out. But real quickly on the Nigeri Candidate's Nija, we'll just call her Nija because that's what her friends call her.
Right.
Nigeri Candidate's NIL deal. And I don't know who released that she got another $1 million right before, right in the middle of the Women's College World Series Championship.
Right.
Like, I don't know. That's a distraction. I don't know that I want that out right when it happens. But as you said, Nigeri Kennedy never shied away from it because I think she wanted young women to know this is what's possible. This is what's possible for you if you put in the work and you get it done. What I want to know, Eric, and my biggest fascination about the House settlement is the enforcement. We know schools are going to be the ones writing the checks now to student athletes. They have $20.5 million to, spread across all their sports, but we know the formula is going to, be 75% of that to football, 15% to men's basketball, and then 5% to women's basketball. And 5% to all the other sports. Now, you don't have to follow that formula. You can do whatever you want, and you don't have to fund your NIL up to 20.5. That's just the limit. But as part of this, there is an enforcement arm, and it's Deloitte, who does the Academy Award, balloting counts and all that stuff. They're high profile, and they've gone to each conference meetings and told them the metrics that they're going to be using to determine a fair market deal. And they told the ACC 60% of their NIL deals last year would have been rejected under the fair market test. So we're all waiting to see. And my long-winded point here, Eric, is Nyjah Kennedy's deal going to pass fair market value? Because she's making way more than, the pro softball league is just getting started. No one's making that kind of money. They ride around on buses. They're hoping to get to planes, but is Nyjah Kennedy's deal going to pass the fair market value test? And if it isn't, you have the option of continuing to pay that student athlete the money that you're paying them, but you have to take it away from some other part of your cap. So it's going to be fascinating to see how that part of it goes, because if her deal gets rejected, you don't think her lawyers are going to sue and say, are you kidding me? Look at the attention. Look at all the notoriety. Look at all the money we drove to Texas Tech and the university and our other athletes. I'm just fascinated by that part of it, Eric. I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah. No, full disclosure, we talked about this a little bit before taping. I think it depends on what's the definition of fair market, right? Is fair market, hey, this is the market of softball players, or this is the market per sport? Because if we're doing it by sport, no, then she is well above the market there, right? And you made the point that even professional softball league, no one's going to be making that type of money. Now, if we're just talking about return, well, I shouldn't frame it return on investment. If we're talking about, dollar for dollar, the impact that she has brought onto Texas Tech, then she blows that out of the water. Texas Tech softball, Texas Tech athletics, blows it out of the water, right? And that's going to be a point that it's not going to be just for her. It's going to be for, the kid at BYU's making, project or has been reported, multi-million-dollar deal. Or, in Arch Manning, or et cetera, right? Obviously, Arch's case is a little bit different because of the fact his last name is Manning. It's probably pretty easy to say right there, fair market value, so on and so forth. But it is an interesting case. I'm going to take it from a different perspective, and I want to go back and read the quote directly. Steve Sarkisian, as Chip knows, not big on hypotheticals. He likes to engage in the here and now, so he didn't really want to get into the prospect of the House settlement during spring football, not necessarily because it was spring football, but because it hadn't gone into legislation yet. So I'm going to read his direct quote here, which is in my 4 Downs column. Steve said this on April 14th. I'm sorry. The direct quote is, I don't think any of us, and this includes our student athletes, want to be employees. It's clear the us he's referring to as our student athletes, right? Because obviously Steve is an employee when he says us. The quote continues, they don't want to feel like an employee. They want to feel like a student athlete. I want our players to be compensated in a way that's right and fair. We're in a space right now where we don't have a lot of guardrails, don't have a lot of regulation. I think if we don't start doing some of this, we don't start finding a way to get guardrails around this, we're going to lose the idea of student athlete, and we're going to start gravitating closer to an employment status. I don't think any of us want that, Chip. I made this point in the column. I do firmly believe that Steve Sarkisian has, the best interest of, at heart, 17 to 24-year-olds in mind, right? And in this case, them being employees for a litany of reasons probably isn't the best in their best interest. However, I don't think you can deny, and I'm not saying that this is part of Steve's motivation, but I don't think you can deny the fact that if we get into a structure where we're talking about student athletes as employees, that then closes the gap between the power structure, right? Gone are the days of, I'm a Floridian, Bobby Bowden being the coach and saying, hey, you screw up at practice. All right, go, run these stadium steps. And if you don't, well, I'm going to yank your scholarship, right? Those days are gone. What you'll have is, for example, back in Coach Bowden's heyday, a Peter Warwick, who probably would have been making a salary pretty close to Coach Bowden, saying, hey, I don't feel like running those stadium steps. What are you going to do about it, right? I'm an employee. That's a real factor, right? Some of that structure, that power dynamic, it's going to level. And again, I don't want to be too hyperbolic, Chip, but this is something that I think I've been very, very vocal. I think the NCAA was well behind the times on this. The Ed O'Bannon case, the O'Bannon twins case, right, where they saw their likeness in the video game and said, hey, you can't have a player power forward 25 that looks as a shaved head and looks like me and not call it O'Bannon, right? Had they just decided to find a way to fund them then and fund the structure then, you probably wouldn't be dealing with this. But I do think you have to look ahead, Chip, a little bit, and that there may come a time where you're going to have some butting of heads. And if you're a Steve Sarkisian or an insert big-time coach, why would I coach, in essence, professional football without the legislation and rules and guardrails at this level when I can go do it with all the legislation and rules in place there, right? So I'm not trying to be alarmist, but we're here in essence.
Yeah, and it is the coach's job has gotten immensely more difficult. Coaching matters. It's always mattered. It matters more now than ever, because it's why Urban Meyer said, I don't know if my style works in the age of NIL and the transfer portal, because Urban Meyer used fear as a motivating factor. Tom Herman used fear. He's a disciple of Urban Meyer. Those styles are not going to work in this model because of everything you just said. And let's see how this, plays out. Steve Sarkisian, I think, has pushed all the right buttons so far. He's always said, hey, this has been good for us. We just have to keep adapting. And that's what everyone wants to hear. That's what, the coaches who complain about it or balk, it's going to be interesting to see, because right now Clemson is a team that a lot of people think is one of the best teams in college football. We know Dabo Swinney's kind of, been hands off on the transfer portal. So we'll see how the different methods, we're going to need time to see how it works. But you mentioned Arch Manning, and that this is one point that I think at the SEC meetings that came up. Arch Manning, because of his last name, as you pointed out, was a hot property for companies like Red Bull and Waymo and Panini America. So if the clearinghouse, the Deloitte NIL Go clearinghouse, looks at those and sees that that's just a national brand wanting to do business with a student athlete, then none of that money counts against Texas's $20.5 million. Where it's going to get interesting is if it's a booster who owns the company and is paying the student athlete, and is it fair market value? There's a lot of layers to this. They're supposed to be able to turn around, some of these. Well, you can appeal. There's going to be There's going to be an arbitration if there's a dispute, and we'll see. We'll see how that part of it goes. That's the part that everyone wants to know about, because in the schools especially, and Greg Sankey told all the administrators, this has to work. So don't dance around it. Don't try to look for loopholes. This has to work. Otherwise, there will be no guardrails. You guys want guardrails, make this work. So it'll be fascinating. Any other points on that before we move to football?
Well, let's move. We got plenty to get to.
Yes, Eric. Game day, no surprise, will be at Texas Ohio State. It will be Lee Corso's last game, and his first game ever was an Ohio State game. So, college game day will be in Columbus, and don't you? Of course they're going to be in Columbus. It's a massive week one, but appropriately so. So add to the Arch Manning debut that he'll be up against the defending national champions, and of course, in front of game day. Your thoughts,
Chip? I may take some heat for this from the fan base. I understand the symbolism behind, hey, first one was here, let's end it here. I kind of wanted to see, and I promise I'm not speaking as the Floridian. I kind of want to see the Sunshine Scooter go out at Florida State. Just because, for those who don't know, I'm not saying that Florida State is deserving of a game day. This, coming off the year they had. Lee Corso's a Seminole, right? I for some reason, I guess I just thought that it'd be pretty cool, for him to go back to his alma mater and do it there. Put that point aside. The fact is, it will be in Columbus. I think it's great. As you mentioned, it's a full circle deal there, right? And why not send him out? A game that's going to be the biggest stage. It's going to be the spotlight game, the rematch of the college football semifinal, right? I think that's awesome. And I think it just adds to, what is sure to be a spectacle, Chip. You reported it, right? The talk of Ohio State are asking, can we make this a night game? And, there being some pushback, and obviously it's going to remain an 11 a.m. kickoff Central Time, right? But there'll be plenty of storylines going to that game, and it'll be a great send-off, a great atmosphere for, Lee Corso, one of the great ambassadors, great figures in college football, to final headwear game. We'll see. Is he putting on, Brutus, or is it going to be Bevo?
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah. My gosh, Lee Corso is, talk about a guy who has battled to continue to do the things he loves. Eric, you had a column about the X factors for Texas, and you named 5 players who you think are X factors for Texas going into the season. Running back CJ Baxter, tight end Jack Endries, the Cal transfer. Offensive lineman, right guard DJ Campbell, who's the lone returning starter on the offensive line. Now outside linebacker and edge rusher Trey Moore, and defensive back, safety, nickel, I can do anything, Jelani McDonald. Give us your thoughts, on those X factors.
Yeah, I'll try and do a quick hit on each of those 5. Hopefully some of the landscaping going on in the background is not coming through. I'm going to start with CJ Baxter, right? Because I think that's the one that has people most curious. Chip, I'm not down on any of the other Texas running backs. Jarrett Gibson, of course, Christian Clark come back from injury, the incoming freshman. But
James Simon. Watch out for James Simon. But I do think CJ Baxter is, in terms of sheer talent, let's not forget, the nation's #1 overall running back recruit, coming out of Orlando Edgewater in his class. From a potential and ceiling perspective, CJ still has all the tools you're looking for in a back. And I don't think this point can be understated. When we saw CJ, right, granted, he did not partake in spring, but we've seen him just in shorts, and he looks put together. 230 pounds. He's up from beginning his career around that 218 mark. If he can maintain some of that athletic ability while also giving some of that frame, some of that, a bigger frame, as Quintravion Wisner goes down a little bit, right? Trey played at 200 last year. Now he's about $195, $196. He's spoken about wanting to be a more elusive back in the open field, putting his foot in the ground, making a guy miss. I think it's a perfect 1-2 punch, Chip. So I think that is an X factor. Did you want to respond, or? Yeah, I agree, and I'm fascinated because you and I have talked about this before. He played in a gap scheme in high school. He did not run a lot of zone. So his freshman year was a growing pains year, even though he was the opening day starter at running back. How much has he progressed without even playing a game in terms of his comfortability? Because the outside zone is a bread and butter play for Texas, and so I'm eager to see how much he's progressed.
Great point, because I also noted that in the story. Also go DJ Campbell again. Remember, in his recruiting class that featured Kelvin Banks, DJ Campbell was actually the higher rated recruit, right, by 247 Sports. So I think him coming into his own, especially with 4 new starters, or we'll see how it shakes out, but the prospect of 4 new starters on the offensive line, him reaching his ceiling and being that guy, I think that is huge. Jelani McDonald brings a physical presence. The guy describes his playing style as physical and violent, right? Texas secondaries had a lot of things over the last few years. Jahdae Barron, of course, being the Jim Thorpe Award winner. Jalen Catalon was supposed to be that guy who brought that a couple years back. Of course, that didn't work out. If Jelani McDonald can bring that, I think that will be huge for sure. You take a look at some of the other names, Jack Endries. I've been on the record as talking about what I think he will bring to this offense. A safety blanket tight end, a tight end who can give you 60 catches, own the middle of the field, own that intermediate area of the field. You need that, right? Gunnar Helm was huge for that last year for Texas, especially if Arch Manning, if they can get that downfield passing game going, to have a guy who can really own the defense in that shallow intermediate area of the field, I think that will be huge for sure. And I think this guy's going to walk in and be an all-conference type of player in my mind. And last but not least, Trey Moore. I don't, maybe it was a little unfair. Steve Sarkisian at the Touchdown Club of Houston entering last season when he was asked by a fan, hey, who's a player that we aren't talking about, don't know about, that we need to know for fall, mentioned Trey Moore. The expectation were really high. Trey dominated at the group of 5 level in the American Athletic Conference. And of course, I covered Conference USA his first year when he broke out as a stud. I think he's finding his footing, right? As, a hybrid outside linebacker / edge. I'm really interested to see, because listen, if you can get, I'm not saying he has to be the guy who gives you 14.5 sacks that he was at UTSA, but if he can at least tap it and be that guy. We had Jeff Traylor on. There's a cheap plug. Go listen to the episode last year when Jeff Traylor spoke about Trey Moore's work ethic. If he is that guy on the opposite side of Colin Simmons, Chip, with Anthony Hill's pass rushing ability, I mean, look out. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah. I'm fascinated to see how they use Trey Moore, because you have to get Colin Simmons on the field as much as possible. The guy's a wrecking machine. And Trey Moore, I think, heard from the NFL scouts that, hey, you're not going to play defensive end in the NFL. You're going to have to play outside linebacker. And if that is something, you can show us, great. And so now he's back to show the NFL he can play outside linebacker. And on Jack Endries, I'm with you. This guy could lead the team in receptions, much like Gunnar Helm last year. So we'll see how that chemistry develops between he and Arch Manning. It's happening right now. Jack Endries, a summer enrollee. Workouts, player-led workouts are happening as they develop their chemistry. Eric, I do, before we get on to a couple of things here, Brent Venables, head coach of the Oklahoma Sooners, had that losing season in year 1, then a 10-win season, then last year another losing season. They haven't had 2 losing seasons in 3 years since 99, I guess, the end of the John Blake era. So he takes a picture with a recruit. He does horns down with the recruit. This a year after he does the Danny Stutzman t-shirt modeling With Danny Stutzman, Oklahoma only fears God. Texas fears Oklahoma. And then Anthony Hill had something to say about that after the 34-3 pounding Texas administered. Your thoughts?
That was the fourth down in my 4 downs column. So I'll try to quickly summarize it. I think Brent Venables is a good coach. Obviously, OU, it's a big time gig to step into for your first head coaching gig, right? I think he's a solid coach. This might not work out. We'll see. You have another 6 and 7 year. That it might not be his choice, right? So we'll see. And in the few interactions I've had with him, I think he's a decent guy. I genuinely do. My issue that I had was this. I have no issue. I am not the guy who gets up in arms about people poking fun at your rival or celebrating the way you want to. I'm not that person. If you do it in the immediacy of beating Texas, have at it, right? If you want to, even in the off season, if you're coming off of beating Texas, and it's a 10-win year, have at it. I personally thought, the deal with Stutz was a little corny, just because, all right, come on, you should be focused on next year. But fair enough, whatever, right? You can't, Chip. I don't think anyone with 2 eyes can look at Texas and OU and think that both programs are in the same place entering year 2 in the SEC. Texas feels like it has all the momentum. For anyone who hears this and wants to call me a Texas homer or say, all right, you're the guy covering Texas, fair enough. I'll take that. I didn't go to UT. I'm not a Texan. I'm just trying to be objective. Not being prisoner of the moment, but they just had Felix Ojo, big-time recruit, cancel his visit to Oklahoma. He's going to visit Texas. It feels like a lot of the momentum is heading Texas's way. If the high school kid, if the 17-year-old kid, or I don't know how old the kid is, but if a high school kid wants to throw the horns down, fine. He's a kid. I just feel like at this point, considering all the circumstances I just laid out, and Brent Venables' record is 22-17, 12-14 in conference play over 3 years, he should have bigger fish to fry than a horns down. I feel like he should be above the fray. If you do it in the spur of the moment, right? I get it. Football's an emotional game. That's fine. Doing it at this point just seems a little corny, Chip. That's just me.
Yeah. I'm with you. Let's see how this plays in October. Brent Venables brought in John Mateer, the ballyhooed transfer from Washington State, and Washington State's offensive coordinator. They're going the Vanderbilt, New Mexico State, Diego Pavia, Tim Beck, Jerry Kilrout. It worked for Vanderbilt. We'll see if it works for Oklahoma. Texas baseball. Jim Schlossnagle has done the player evaluation meetings, and now we're seeing some transfer portal targets visiting. The shortstop from Virginia, Eric Becker, and the shortstop from Maryland, Mike Corciani. I'm probably butchering that, but it makes me wonder, since they've brought in a couple shortstops, if Jalen Flores is thinking about turning pro. But Jim Schlossnagle trying to rebuild, he's got some, depending on what, he knows Kimball Schuessler's leaving. They've already got the commitment from Justin Livingston, the first baseman who comes in from Wichita State, who, is a good hitter, looks like a good pickup for Jim Schlossnagle. And Texas women's basketball, Eric, has signed Grace Prenter, who was on the Ireland under 20 team. She is a 40% three-point shooter. We'll see if Grace Prenter can bring some luck of the Irish three-point shooting to help space the floor for Madison Booker, Rory Harmon, Jordan Lee, Justice Carlton, Brianna Preston, and we know that Vic has been busy in the portal with the Cunningham, Brea Cunningham from Arizona, who was one of the top portal targets or one of the top players in the portal. She's a big, and Vic's going for it, Eric. He's trying to keep up with, with Don Staley in South Carolina, which may be spending more money in their NIL cap on women's basketball than most. But your thoughts?
Chip, I had to pull up this quote. So this was the quote from Texas Athletics around the addition of Grace Granger. Excuse me. Sorry, cough got me. But I just need you to listen to this quote, because are we sure this is Vic Schaefer? Is this an imposter? Grace comes to us from Ireland, where she's played the national team the past few years. Grace will be someone who can really stretch the floor. Cool. Sounds like Vic. And shoot the ball from deep range. Who is that guy? Chip, I think you made the point that he's going for it, right? I'm not saying that Texas is going to turn into, the Golden State Warriors and start jacking up threes, but maybe, just maybe, Vic's like, all right, I got to bring a little bit of shooting. Chip, what'd you think of that?
Yeah, he's excited. I mean, Vic got to the Final Four. We know he went to the national championship game twice at Mississippi State. He's a guy who wants to, get the brass ring. He wants to hold the trophy. And look, coaches are looking everywhere. Sean Miller was recruiting a French point guard, Evan Dubois. I don't think they're recruiting him anymore, but they're looking everywhere for talent and help. So go get it, Vic. All right. Eric, you ready for some take it or leave it?
Oh, man, Chip, I am ready, no doubt.
All right, let's do it. Who is serving first today?
I will be serving to you, so I will lead off. Take it or leave it, number 1. A 7-win year this season gets Brent Venables shown the door. Take it or leave it.
Here's the thing. He bought himself some goodwill, depending on how good John Mateer is at quarterback. And I see a little bit of Sam Levitt in John Mateer. This is a guy who's got some athleticism, can move around, but throws it very well. Everything I'm hearing is that he's been a big-time team leader. Guys have gravitated toward him. He's embraced that role. I'm going to leave this because I think if Mateer shows enough excitement, the fans will go with it. Now, it could be a thin line, Eric. If it's a 6-win season, the Boomers may be like, let's get someone in here who knows how to, get it done on both sides of the ball. We know Brent Venables made a good hire in Jeff Lebby. He did not make a good hire when he promoted Seth Littrell last year. OU's offense was staggeringly bad. I'm going to leave this, but barely. What say you?
Yeah, Chip. I mean, just to quickly piggyback off something you said, and listen, I like Seth Littrell. Obviously, I covered CUSA, so I had a lot of interactions with Seth. Anyone who covered Conference USA, and granted, and Seth is an OU guy. Like, let's put that first and foremost. And anyone who covered Seth Littrell in North Texas, that just felt like an odd fit. I mean, it really did. So there's that. No, I am taking it, but I want to add this. I think it really depends on how Texas finishes. To continue piggybacking off my point in four downs, if Texas continues on their trajectory, if they make another college ball playoff semifinal or even win this whole thing, and OU wins 7 games, yeah, that continues to widen the gap between the two programs. Now, if there's something that's a little bit closer in final result of year, then I think you have room for discussion. But I agree with the point you made. You used the example of Vanderbilt. I'll use the example, me being a former Group of 5 guy, Western Kentucky, when they brought in Bailey Zappi, they brought in Zach Kitley, right? It worked out well for both of those. Bailey Zappi, of course, not necessarily a great NFL career, but made it from Houston Baptist to Western Kentucky to the NFL. Zach Kitley went on to be a great offensive coordinator and now has a head coaching gig, right? So there's precedent. The point I'm making is there's precedent for, if we're going to do this, bring in the whole team. So you have to set yourself with the best position for success, Chip.
Yeah. And OU's been aggressive in the portal. no doubt. John Mateer and Jaden Ott, the running back from Cal. All right, take it or leave it. Number 2, Eric, Texas softball should be the prohibitive favorite to win the national championship again next season. With Tegan Cavan back, Reese Atwood back, and Hannah Wells coming in. Take it or leave it.
Chip, I'll be quick on this one. This is kind of a fundamental principle of mine. To be the man, you got to beat the man. And provided the man hasn't, just completely, done a fire sale, right? Like Texas has plenty of talent coming back. I'm not just going to sit here and say, OU, it was fluke or luck. No, OU's got to go through Texas. Tech's got to go through Texas. Some of the great, other SEC teams got to go through Texas. So I'm taking it, Chip.
Yeah, I'm going to take it as well. Tegan Cavan is an assassin. Fun to watch because she looks, like I said, she looks like she's about to, check her math homework when she takes the mound, and she just carves you up. All right, Eric, take it or leave it. Number 3.
Take it or leave it. Number 3, we will end up with a 16-team college football playoff in 2026. Take it or leave it, Chip.
I think we will end up with a 16-team college football playoff because everybody is about access. And that's where the most money is. So, of course, we're going to end up with a 16-team college football playoff in 2026. I guess the bigger question is, can the SEC and the Big Ten agree? Since they have the power now, all the other conferences gave them the power to basically have final say on the structure of the 16-team playoff, whether it be the 4-4-2-2-1-3 model, that's really slides off the tongue, or the 5+11 model, where you take the 5 highest ranked conference champions and the other 11 are at large, remains to be seen. But I'm going to take this. Eric, how about you?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on everything. Hit the head of the nail, everything you said there. I'm going to take it. I hope we don't, because I think 16 is too many, but it's not.
I think if we go to 16, get rid of one of those tomato can non-conference games. Right?
You have to. No, you have to. You have to do that. Correct.
Go back to 11. Go back to 11 regular season games.
Yeah. I think we'll end up there. I'm not 100% sure that I think it's the best formula, but I think it's the formula that we're heading towards because the folks in power with the power, wield the power, make those moves.
Yeah. And the other tricky thing for the SEC is, do they go to a 9-game conference schedule? And I think for the SEC, them going to a 9-game conference schedule is almost predicated on going to a 16-team college football playoff because Greg Sankey is very concerned about access. He doesn't like the lack of transparency from the committee in terms of what they're using as criteria for teams to get into the playoff as at-large, bids. Obviously, Alabama, South Carolina did not make the playoff last year, and that is still sticking with Greg Sankey and his constituents. So look for something later this month from the SEC with regard to that. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening to this latest edition of the Flagship Podcast. Make sure you get over to horns247.com, become an annual member. We've got a great promo going on. So head over there, get in on that deal, become an annual member because that gives you VIP access to all the team sites on the preeminent 24/7 Sports Network. That's where Eric and I will be. So until next time, for Eric Henry, I am Chip Brown. Stay safe and keep the faith.